Today we'll be taking notes called proportion word problem. So we're looking at proportions, proportional relationships, and we're going to put them in the context of word problems today. Essential question, what is the equation for proportional relationships? What is the equation for proportional relationships? So let's look at a couple problems here, and we'll look at the equation as well. So let's go here. Let's talk about our proportional equation. So this is the equation that we could use every single time to figure out a problem. And the equation looks like this. Y equals K times X. Go and write that down. Y equals K times X. Y equals K times X. So X, that is the input. That is the input. That's the value that's on the X axis. K, if you remember, this is our constant of proportionality. Go and write that down. That's the constant of proportionality. That's the rate at which it's changing. It's that constant number that they're going by. If a loaf of bread is $3, every time you add a loaf of bread to your shop to your list, it's another $3, another $3. It's a constant proportionality. And Y is going to be your output, how much comes out. And we're going to be using this equation on these problems. We're also going to look at a couple other ways to solve these word problems as well. All right. So make sure you have that. We're going to be using that as well. I also want to cover again unit rate. Unit rate, remember, unit rate means the Y value when X equals, anyone remember? 1. The Y value when X equals 1. So sometimes that looks like an ordered pair. Sometimes we have a 1 and then some number here. Sometimes it looks like an ordered pair. That's the unit rate. On the graph, remember, we had to look at the x-axis and find where it's 1 and then go up to the line. So that's unit rate. So proportional equation, y equals kx, where k is that constant of proportionality. I'll show you what that looks like again. And then we also have unit rates, the y value when x equals 1. So find when x equals 1, look at that y value, and that together is your unit rate. Good. All right, so let's look at some examples here. All right, so go ahead and write this down. Joe practices piano 1,624 minutes in 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, he practices 1,624 minutes. Assuming he practices same amount each week. How many minutes does Joe practice in 1 week? All right, so I'm going to write that down. Joe practices piano 1,624 minutes in 4 weeks. Assuming he practices the same amount each week, how many minutes does Joe practice in 1 week? So we'll start with our equation. Remember, y equals kx. Kx. y equals kx. So we have an input and we have an output. And then we have our constant of proportionality. So I know, here's what I know. Go ahead and circle this. I'm going to highlight it. I have weeks being one variable, and I have minutes being the other variable. Well, as I add weeks, I'm going to get more minutes. So this is going to be my x variable. This is going to be my y variable. So circle those two. Go ahead and write an x above 4 weeks and a y above 1,624 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug those in. So k is still going to be k. But now here, 4 weeks, I'm going to times it by 4. Put a 4 for x. And then my 1,624 minutes, 1,624 minutes. Good. And my goal is to say, okay, then what is that constant of proportionality? How much does it change by each week? Well, this is simple. This is just a one-step equation. One-step equation. So if I look here, draw a line down the equal sign. What's happening to my x or my k? I'm multiplying by 4. So if you remember, x is, then we got to do the inverse. If I'm multiplying by 4, the inverse would be to divide by 4 on both sides. So I'm going to divide by 4, divide by 4. So those cancel out. K equals. Now, if you need to use a calculator on these parts, that's okay. You're going to do 1,624 divided by 4, and you're going to get 406. That's your constant of proportionality. That's how much it changes. That's how much it changes. Now, I want to know, let me take my equation again. Y equals kx. I want to know how much does Joe practice in 1 week. So my weeks are x, so that's my new x. So I'm going to use a new equation. And I'm going to say x is 1. But now I know what k is. K is 406. So I'm going to take that 406. I'm going to take that 406 right here. I'm going to bring it down here. And I'm going to multiply it by 1. And that's going to tell me I want to figure out how many minutes that is. So that's y. So I multiply 406 times 1, and that's just 406. That's my answer. Let me put some units on there. 406 minutes. So you're really going to use the equation twice. You're really going to use the equation twice. Once to find your k, which is 406. And then the other time to multiply it by whatever the question's asking you. Now that's one way to do it. That's I would say the algebraic way. Here's another way to think about it. Here's option 2. Go ahead and write this on the side here. Option 2. You can ask yourself this. Well, what about for 1 week? What about for 1 week? So you can ask yourself that question. What about for 1 week? And you can start your sentence. Go ahead and write this down with me. In 1 week, Joe practices blank minutes. In 1 week, Joe practices blank minutes. Well, if he does 1,624 minutes in 4 weeks, how could I figure out how much he does in 1 week? Remember, this is always y over x. Y over x. So I'm going to take 1,624. I'm going to divide that by 4. That's my 406 minutes per week. So every week, 406 minutes. So in 2 weeks, 812 minutes. So 406 minutes per week. So in 1 week, Joe practices 406 minutes. Some students like option two because it's more of a logical reasoning. Some students like the equation because they enjoy like the algebra part of math. So I'm okay. Either option you want to do, if you want to work through it logically, what makes sense to you, or if you want to work through it algebraically with an equation, either option is fine. All right, so I'm gonna just shrink this for me. You can just write your next problem underneath. If you run out of space at any time, please feel free to use the back of your notes. All right, let's do number two. All right, number two here, sorry. That was number one. Number two. All right, so now we looked at Joe. Now let's look at a candle. A, sorry, 6-inch candle burns in 3 hours. Now we're going to assume that it burns at the same rate. How long would it take a 16-inch candle to burn down? All right, go and write that down. All right, so we're going to look at this and we're going to do it again in the two ways. We're going to do this one with algebra, and this one we'll just call this one logic. All right, let's do the logic one first. I like to start with logic one. All right, so a 6-inch candle burns in 3 hours. So if I know 6-inch candle burns in 3 hours, the question I'm going to ask myself then is, I always want to get down to the unit rate. How much candle burns, or how many inches, how much candle burns in 1 hour? That's always what I want to ask myself. How much of the candle burns in 1 hour? Because if I can figure out 1 hour, then I can tell you, oh, in 2 hours, and 3 hours, and 4 hours. So in 1 hour, a candle burns blank inches. I'm gonna write down that sentence. We're gonna fill that in. In 1 hour, a candle burns blank inches. That in means inches. So let's figure that out. In 1 hour, well, if 6 inches burns in 3 hours, remember I'm going to do y over x. So 6 inches burns in 3 hours. That means that 6 divided by 3, it burns 2 inches every hour. So in 1 hour, it burns 2. We do some blue and blue so you can see them line up. In 1 hour, a candle burns 2 inches. So 1 hour, 2 inches. If you want, you could do a table. Hours, inches. So 1 hour burns 2 inches. That means in 2 hours, it would burn how many inches? 4 inches. In 3 hours, it would burn 6. So how many would it take to get to 16 inches? Well, we see the pattern here. It's just timesing by 2. So what number times by 2 is 16? So that would take 8, because 8 times 2 is 16. So it would take 8 hours to burn a 16-inch candle. Good. So it would take 8 hours to burn a 16-inch candle. Make sure you write that down. Now, algebraically, we'll use our equation. So let's try it out. Y equals kx. Here, 3 hours, that's my x. So I have a 3. I don't know what k is, and I'm multiplying these two numbers. I do know what y is. In 3 hours, it burns 6 inches. So 6 inches. So this is again, simple one step. So k times 3 equals 6. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Because remember, I want to get k by itself. So there we go. K is by itself. 6 divided by 3 is 2. That means that my constant of proportionality is 2. It changes by 2 for every x that it increases. So let me write that equation again. Y equals, let me do it actually in red. Y equals kx. And I know that k is 2. So I'm going to cross this out, and this is going to be a 2 now, times, and then my hours now, x is hours. I want to know, I don't know how many hours, so I still have x, but I do know that my y, my inches, is 16. So 16 equals 2 times x. So I'm just going to divide that by 2 to get x by itself. X is going to tell me how many hours. This is going to tell me how many hours. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So 8 hours to burn 16-inch candle. That was sloppy. So you can kind of look at those two methods. Algebra way, we use our our equation, solve for k, find our constant of proportionality. Then we plug it back in and then use our new x and y, our new numbers, to solve for the variable. And we found those 8 hours. Logically, we say, okay, well then how many for one? Once I know how many for 1 hour, then I can expand and use it for 2 hours. All right, cool. Nice job on that one. Let's do number 3. You're going to do this one on your own. Come around and help. You get to pick. Over here on the side, the method I'm going to use is, and go ahead. Are you going to use algebra or are you going to use the logical way? So go ahead and pick one of those and you're going to write that in the sentence here. So that way when I come by, I know which one you're going to use on number 3 here. So algebra, again, is the one where we use our equation, y equals kx, find k, and then plug it in. My personal preference, I would probably use algebra. That's just because I enjoy equations. But for some of you, all of a sudden, logically, some of you guys are really good using logic, and you're like, math is hard for me, but this makes sense to me. Go ahead and use the logic way. That's perfectly okay to use the logic way. All right, number 3. Here we go. A company orders 12 box lunches from a deli for $111.60. If each boxed lunch costs the same, how much do 18 box lunches cost? How much do 18 box lunches cost? A company orders 12 box lunches from a deli for $11.60. If each box lunch costs the same, how much do 18 box lunches cost? So you're either going the algebra way or you're doing the logic way. Good. I'll get you started here. Y equals kx. And the logic way, you're trying to answer the question, how much does one box lunch cost? How much does one box lunch cost? Once you know how much one costs, then you can figure out how much 18 costs. Good, go ahead and work on these. All right. So let's do the logic way. How much does one box lunch cost? Well, I know I can just do y divided by x. 111 and 60 cents divided by, that was 12 box lunches. Again, you can use a calculator. Then you can divide those out. And so 111.60 divided by 12, that equals $9.30. If your calculator says 9.3, remember we're dealing with money, so we have to add that zero because our money is in hundredths. So 30. So that's how much one lunch costs. One lunch is $9.30. So to figure out 18 lunches cost, I'm just going to take my $9.30 and times it by the number of lunches. There has to be 18 of them. So I'll take that 9.30 times it by 18. And I get $167.40. Again, calculator says 167.4, but we're talking about money. So we need to do 0.40. So my answer, you should have gotten $167.40. Using algebra, y equals kx. Box lunches, that's going to be my x. That's going to be my x. And the cost, that's going to be my y. So k, I know I have 12 box lunches, so I'm timesing that by 12, is going to equal 111.60. Draw my line down the equal sign. Divide by 12, divide by 12. You notice it's really the same math. We're taking 111.60 divided by 12. That's exactly what I'm doing here. These cancel. K equals 9.3. So I'm going to take my equation again. This time I'm going to plug in this for K. And I want to know 18 box lunches. 18 box lunches. Well, lunches are X. So for 18 equals Y. And notice this is exactly what I did here. So it's the same math. 167.40. And it's in money, so I'm going to add the zero, add the dollar sign. So 18 box lunches would cost $167.40. Good. So two ways to look at these, logically or with algebra. The essential question that we asked at the beginning, what is the equation for proportional relationships? The equation is, go ahead and state the equation. Give you a few minutes to find the equation. Go ahead and write it down. Good. You should have written the equation is y equals kx. Good. Nice job today. And those will conclude our notes for today.